Welcome back to Total Disclosure. My name's Ty, and I am the host of the show. Welcome to part two of our episode with Rizwan Virk. We have a wonderful conversation about simulation theory, and part one has been out for a couple weeks. This is part two. I do want to remind everyone that there is an issue with Riz. The microphone he was using was kind of off center. So instead of telling him to pull it up and put it right in his face, like, say, Joe Rogan would do, it was my first in studio episode. I didn't do it. We also weren't wearing headphones. Terrible, terrible mistake. And I've obviously just want to say, I apologize for that. This is mainly audio podcast, so we need to be better about that. I have been doing better about that. I've made a lot of adjustments, as well as other things to improve and kind of make sure and ensure that the audio is the best quality it can be for a podcast. So, with that being said, part two, Rizwan Virk. This one opens where the last one set off, and it opens on pretty powerful moment for me. So I hope you guys enjoy. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, all that. If you're listening on one of the great podcast platforms, please leave a review. It's so simple. It helps us so much. A favorable review, 5-star rating, and then follow the show. Guys, enjoy. Are we living in a simulation? I'm 11.
Yeah.
I have no idea what I'm looking at, right? I run into the house and I tell my mom, I'm like, what the fuck? I wasn't saying fuck, but I was like, what did I just see? Like, what was that? And she didn't try to like tell me I saw balloons or God or anything. She was like, you saw a UFO. And I'm like, what's a UFO? And then
came right out and just said that.
she
it or not?
instilled in me what?
Was she there? Did she see it? Or
She was in the house. She didn't see it though.
she didn't see it though.
But it ties back in later in life. When she died, I was in the room. But so she tells me from a young age, she lets me know that there's shit in the world that we don't understand.
That's
right?
important, I think. Yeah.
So and that's how I went on. That's how I saw life going forward, was that there was mystery, right? That it wasn't just black and white. There was some gray. And it came full circle because I was in this very toxic environment in Hollywood and filmmaking, and just, we're around people that were so awful. And then I come home because she's dying and I'm in the room with her final moments. And I can't really explain it without like crying or tearing up, but we make these micro decisions, right? Very, very quick decisions on a consistent basis, going back to the simulation idea. But I look down while her hand is in my hand. I look up. This is in a millisecond. By the time I looked down and came up, this orb crossed my field of vision, just went out the window and up. And I looked back and my mom was gone.
Right. So that was her. Or somebody that came to get her.
Or yes. All she kept saying was she didn't want to be alone. She didn't want to be alone. She didn't want to be alone. She didn't want to die. And I mean, she died on 4, 3, 2, 1. So
21.
Yeah. So, and that's at that moment that I saw that orb, all these memories start flooding back. Now, I had known about my UFO sighting, of course, but all these other memories start coming back about her. And then I won't bog down too deep in it, but I started total disclosure the minute I saw that orb, because I was like, I want answers.
That's interesting. It's almost like your seeing the orb was purposeful.
That's what I mean.
In a way, to get you to go down this path.
Yes, because then
Are we recording, by the way? Or?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. No, just
unapologetically, I've been in the right place at the right time far too many times. I was in the right place to bring Robert Salas into Nancy Mace's office, allow him to brief her on the 1967 Malmstrom case. right place to see Danny Sheehan, and then I end up at Contact in the Desert, and all these things have happened and led me to this moment right now. And I feel like it was all set in motion that day I saw the UFO, and my mom told me that there was mystery in the world. She let me know that we didn't understand everything, right? And then she brought me to the library, that she gave me Communion by Whitley Strieber. She sent me down this path. And then she kept me on. When I diverted from the path, she knew I loved filmmaking and podcasting. And then she shows me this orb when she dies and sets me on this path, total disclosure.
See, that's really fascinating to me because, I have this theory that we talked about the life review earlier.
Right.
I believe we also have what's called a life preview. And that is, before we're incarnate. So in a video game, you choose your character, right?
So like soul contract.
Like a soul contract, but also like, you choose attributes of your, like in a video game, you choose like elf, dwarf,
right.
Hobbit, whatever, right? You choose your race.
Circumstances.
Yeah. And you have different attributes.
Right.
Of that. We used to play Dungeons and Dragons and we used to roll dice.
I loved it.
Yeah. And so, you have strength, constitution, and I think we come in with a certain amount of each of these that is part of our character definition or our character sheet, if you will. But we also come in with a storyline. So it's related to this idea of a soul contract, but it's basically an overall storyline of things that we might want to accomplish in this life. And that we still have the opportunity to change. And so there's a guy whose work I'm a fan of, a guy named Dr. Michael Newton. He wrote a book called Journey of Souls. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
No, but
He passed away a while ago, but in the 90s it came out. It was one of the best-selling books about this subject. And he would hypnotize his patients and took them back for traumas and or whatever reason he was doing, the regression. And they would end up between lives, like before they were born, but after the previous life. And so they would describe to him what went on in what the Tibetans would call the bardo, which bardo means literally in between, right?
The limbo, right? Yeah.
Yeah, in between. So, we might even call it the afterlife or heaven, depending on, you look at it as a pre-life or afterlife.
Right.
And it was interesting because he said that they would see on what looked like a screen. So again, we have to remember these are metaphors. It was like a screen with a machine that showed these lines of their life, but it also showed certain points where you could diverge depending on the choices that you would make at the time. And so I see that as essential in the video game of life, if you will.
Right.
We have a storyline, and these are the things that we're drawn back to again and again. We also have side quests, so we go off and we do other things, but keep getting drawn back to certain areas. Now, he also said he could zoom in on this timeline and see what might happen at that point in time. So we also have this preview capability.
Wow.
Which is we can look at what might happen if you do X or Y. Now, for example, if you hadn't seen that orb, would you have gone down this path? And so in a sense, it was almost as if, okay, if you were in a game, we need the character to do something. We need to show, in this case, would be your writer's room, not necessarily the writer's room for the whole world.
Right.
It's the writer's room, which is you, the player, really,
right,
sitting there with perhaps a guide or a director or who knows who else is there with you. Being of light, whatever terminology you
God, yeah, whatever.
God, Jesus,
yeah.
You name it. But the point is, there's a part of you that knows this was your intention. And so how can we get you to move in a certain direction? And I think this, by going forward,
these like nexus moments,
it's trying out what might happen if you didn't have that. And now this ties right back to the Philip K. Dick speech, That's Friend, where he said, not only are we living in a computer programmed reality, that's the line everybody remembers, but that the only clue we have is when some alteration occurs in our reality. So he came to believe that people, some beings were able to go back and change the timeline, but they would run the timeline forward to see what would happen, and then they would go back and change it. So he came to believe that the Man in the High Castle, I don't know if you've seen
you have a
that
great series on Amazon.
Based on a book
from Philip K. Dick, yeah.
1960s, and I think it was his most well-known work before Blade Runner, came out.
Yeah,
It was a huge hit,
right.
Which happened just a few months after he died.
Yeah.
But
You didn't even get to see the success.
he didn't get to see the success. But luckily, his whole life was a financial struggle. He finally made some money because of the screenplay, and he bought a house for Tessa and her son and their son. And so, when I was talking to
Okay.
Tessa,
Yeah.
she said that he came to believe that was a real timeline. That there was actually a timeline where Germany and Japan won the war, and that timeline was unwound, and we are now on a different timeline. That what he wrote in The Man in the High Castle, he said, was from fragmentary memories. But then later he said he came to remember that entire timeline. So this gets us into a really weird aspect of time. In a simulated reality, you can run a process forward, but then you can change a variable and you can rerun it.
Right.
And he said,
Right.
now we're on a timeline, which is perhaps what he called the consensus gentium reality, right? That is different from what he might remember or other people remember. This, of course, ties to the Mandela
Holy
effect.
shit.
But before we get to the Mandela effect, I just want to finish up this idea that he also said to Tessa, and she told me, that these beings, whoever they are, claim they prevented the JFK assassination in Dallas, but then he got assassinated in Orlando in the next timeline. And then in the next timeline, he got assassinated somewhere else, or it led to a bad outcome, like a nuclear war.
So every time they changed it, it would.
They could try
Time was fighting back.
Yeah, or not so much as fighting back. That sounds like the plot of that show based on a Stephen King novel.
Oh, 11, right, yeah.
11/22/63.
Yeah.
The date was that he was assassinated. But it was more like they tried it out and they didn't like the outcome. So they're like, okay, let's go back and now let's go down this particular branch. And so is it possible, and this happened to me in my life as well. This is why I was keying into your point, not just that you'd seen the orb, I know you talk about UFOs a lot, but that set you on a certain path. And
diverted me completely.
So I was at the height of my success in Silicon Valley. And, I was running a startup program here at MIT, very prestigious institution. And during that time, I had a personal tragedy. It was I had to have heart surgery. And I ended up going into the hospital just before I was supposed to finish this program and present to all these people. And as I was recovering, I had a series of visions. And the visions basically said to me, and just to go back, if you had asked me in high school, like, what am I going to do with my life? I'd say, well, I'm going to be a software entrepreneur, and then I'm going to be a writer. And I just had this knowing. Like, how did I know that? That was just a knowing. And so I got clearly, as I was recovering from the surgery, which took me many months, by the way.
It's heart surgery is not something you just.
Like 6 years later, and I'm still recovering, to be honest with you.
Right.
But during that time, the message came back to me. I had a series of visions, and the message was very clear to me that, hey, you had a story. The first part of your story was you're going to be an entrepreneur, and the second part of your story is you're going to be a writer. But meanwhile, you're spending all your time in Silicon Valley trying to raise a big VC fund, going to the next $1 billion fund, trying to be the next Mark Andreessen or whoever, and said, that's not your story. That's not why you're here. And then after, when I was recovering, every time I tried to jump back into Silicon Valley and do a business, I would end up back in the hospital, right here in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I would end up having additional stents. But then it would take me a while to recover. But I had just enough energy every day to take a cab to the local Starbucks at the Cambridge Art Gallery Mall, and I would write for a couple hours each day. And I finished 2 books in the 9 months that I was recovering. And one of the books that I wrote was the first edition of the Simulation Hypothesis, which went on to become a best-selling book. And of course, now I have the new edition out, which is all about AI. But I think the point that I'm trying to make is, for me, there were multiple paths, and it was something that appeared to be a personal tragedy actually forced me onto another path. And that might have been the storyline path that I was meant to be on. But because my conscious self
was trying to divert,
kept trying to get caught up, it was in what I call NPC mode. NPC mode is when you're just based on your conditioning. You're reacting. And if you spend a lot of time in Silicon Valley, you get conditioned to think, oh, now you made $1 million. Now you have to make 5. You made 5. You have to make 10. You made 10. You have to start a company that sells for $1 billion. Or in Hollywood, I'm sure there's a similar conditioning. And
that's why I left.
New York, that's why you left, right? In New York, too. You see that with the finance industry.
It's too much.
There's just a certain conditioning that happens.
Yeah.
And it happens to all of us in wherever we grow up.
Yeah.
It happens in religions. But in this case, it was, talking more about professional stuff. What am I doing with my career? And as opposed to what my soul wanted me to do, which I like to say was the storyline that I had laid out for myself. It was like, you spent plenty of time on this part. And that's good. That was part of your storyline. It's not like that was a waste. But now you should be doing this. And that's when I switched my focus to being more of a writer, and I went back into academia.
And now best-selling,
Right. So it's probably what I'll be remembered for at this point. But it also brought together the threads of my life. So is it possible that some part of me saw what would happen if I went the other way versus this way, and said this way is important, and unfortunately we're going to have to do this thing that seems like a bad thing to you, which is a physical
ailment that's going to require
literally going to require laying on a couch for months and months and months, but it's going to set you on the right path, which it did.
Because you'll be thinking, and you'll be thinking about existential stuff, I'm sure, because it's heart surgery. I'm sure there was some this might not go right.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like this.
It was, if I only have a few years left, what do I want to do?
What do you want to do?
All along that there were books that I wanted to write.
It's amazing.
And I had written some books before.
Were you scared of death?
Yeah, I'm sure. I didn't know how long I had, especially since after the surgery, the doctors couldn't explain to me what was wrong. Because I said, well, it hurts. Your heart's fine. We don't know what's going on. I don't have any energy. Your heart's fine. We don't know what's going on. So I had to go to alternative medicine. But at the same time, it did, it got me in that mode where I had written 2 books in 9 years. Here I wrote 2 books in 9 months. And
Jeez.
one of those was an academic book for the startup world. But anyway, that I think is an interesting play on this idea of simulation in the video game, which is there's a purpose to the things that might happen to us.
And again, and it circles back to what I think is the third question I asked is, if we found out tomorrow it is a simulation, what does it change? It doesn't. And people are looking at it the wrong way, right? Because in your case, in my case, I think we're right where we're supposed to be. Right? Where we were always determined to, this was the road. And
if we weren't going to be on it, we might have needed a course correction.
Correct.
It's kind of like in the Hunger Games, right?
Yes!
No one has accused this world of being all joy. Swami Yogananda said, ceaseless joy is not the nature of this world. But in the Hunger Games, when they were playing, they would send them something, right? And they would send it with a balloon or something. I forget how.
Yeah. And
it would drop down. And it's almost like part of us, our
care package.
Care package.
Yeah.
Is sending us something that will set us on a different direction.
It's amazing. I wanted to obviously this is total disclosure, right? So I don't think I could get away without asking about UFOs. Could UFOs or non-human intelligences be trying to wake us up to the truth, nudging us to realize we're in something artificial or controlled?
Well, the phenomenon itself is very complicated, as you know. I'm sure you've talked to people who have experienced different aspects of the phenomenon. And, this goes from all the way from orbs, which often seem to have some type of spiritual component, to physical craft with physical beings on them that make them up, to everything in between, which is what's interesting.
Right.
I was, I spent some time with Jacques Vallée. He wrote a nice foreword for me for the French edition of this book in French, and
he's a good guy.
My thinking on the intersection of these two things, both Jacques Vallée and Gary Nolan from Stanford, and Avi Loeb too. I actually work with the Galileo project.
Yeah, Avi's very, very
scientific.
Very, very. Yeah. Exactly.
He's looking at it purely as a scientific and an extraterrestrial.
Yeah. Where Jacques is more into that, he is bringing that, technology element to it, but also the stories and
the
cultural elements.
The mythos,
yes.
The fae.
Yes,
fairy,
exactly. From the names only change throughout time.
Yeah.
Right. Aliens are what fairies were then, and
so. Yeah. But he told me a story, and I talked about it a little bit on some podcasts, but not that much. But he told me a story where there was a UFO that supposedly landed in a clearing in the redwood trees in Northern California, or maybe it was Southern Oregon. It was up in the Pacific Northwest. And he said that the UFO came down at a 45-degree angle and landed and left some marks. And so, of course, everybody was concerned about
The
what was going
remarks,
on
yeah.
around. But he stayed after all the other investigators had left. And if you know Jacques, he likes to spend some time with the witnesses and really listen to them and get to know them as people as well. And he said afterwards, he said, well, there's one thing I want to know. If it came down at a 45-degree angle, look at those big, redwood trees. They would have had to cut through the trees. And they said, yeah, that's exactly what happened. But we didn't want to say that because we'll sound crazy. So theoretically, it came down almost like a hologram. This is my language now, my interpretation. Jacques didn't say this.
Right.
But then it came down and became physical. So that's when you render inside a video game, there's a resing process, right? If you've ever played a video game and you're on a slow computer, it'll like res parts of the room and you can kind of walk through the walls and stuff. But then once it's there, you snap back.
Yeah.
And to me, it resembled as if someone was projecting this into this part of our reality. And there are aspects of UFO claims where the UFOs, like I remember one guy was telling me he was out in Joshua Tree and he's looking up, it's a bright blue day and there's nothing there. And then suddenly it's almost as if the craft materialized. Okay, now one explanation is it was cloaking, going to science fiction. Another explanation is that it was being projected to this part of the physical universe.
Right.
And in video games, we do that all the time. How do you get from point A to point B? You can walk, but oftentimes you just simply disappear and you portal and then you appear in the other scene. You give it the XY coordinates where you want to go.
Exactly.
And then your avatar and your
spawns.
Spawns at that point in the physical world.
Right.
And so is it possible that the craft are being projected into this world? That's not to say they couldn't also be extraterrestrial, but there is an overlap between simulation theory and the UFO space. And it gets down to this idea that what is physical then seems to become non-physical, and then it becomes physical again. And that's one element of that.
Right.
Of where the overlap is between these two.
Right. And so do you think that experiencers and abductees and contactees could be interacting with maybe the admin layer or developers in the simulation?
It could be, or it could be even they're interacting with other
or they could
players.
Be the simulation
they could
themselves.
Be in the simulation themselves. They could be projecting into our simulation.
Right.
Or, we talked about Jacques' theory about the different names of these beings over time.
Mm.
And in the Middle East, they have these beings called the jinn.
Yes.
And there's a lot of lore. And I was talking to a friend of mine who went to Pakistan recently, and he spoke to some Sufi mystic, and he was asking about alien abductions, and he said, "Oh, we have these beings. We have plenty of different beings that have been doing this kind of stuff for, thousands of years, right? So it's not even something surprising to them. Whereas to modern science, it's like, what? The guy came through the wall and he appeared as this little being, but Gary Nolan made an interesting comment recently where he said, are these beings avatars being controlled by beings that are, in his case, I think he was talking about more from the point of view of the movie Avatar, where you have a physical body that's being controlled by somebody else.
Right.
Or it could be AI. But you can also think of that in a virtual sense.
Yes.
Where it's, the avatar is being rendered and it's being controlled from somewhere
else. Yes. Outside of us.
Could be outside of the simulation.
Yes.
It could be from a different part of the simulation.
Yes.
And so I'm very open to those ideas, especially because of the high strangeness element that accompanies these. Another thing that both Gary Nolan and Jacques told me about were sightings where one person saw something and the person standing next to them saw something different.
Yeah, that's bizarre.
It's very bizarre, right? And if we think of UFOs simply from the point of view of are they extraterrestrial physical objects, that shouldn't happen. One person should see it, the next person should see it.
And no variation. Yeah. Maybe I saw it from this angle.
Yeah.
But overall should line up.
But Gary, talks about a case where one person, they were sitting in the car next to each other. One saw a cylinder and one saw a circular object, like enough of a difference in shape. And to me, that again sounds like if you're in a video game, what happens is that there is no shared rendering.
Right.
We're each rendering on our computer.
Mm.
So if you and I are standing in the same field, and let's say you're, a level 30 wizard, so you have very advanced skills, and I'm a level 2, neophyte, I'm just starting out as a noob, it's possible that you would see the dragon or the UFO on your screen and say, there it is. And I wouldn't see it on mine. Why?
Because we're at different levels.
We're at different levels. And also that's how the servers send down information based upon what they know about you. So they know you're at level 2 or level 30 and you have that spell and they're like, okay, we want you to see it. We don't want you to see it right now. And so is there something going on that where we think we're in the same physical reality, but we're actually, each of us is rendering it on our own quote unquote computers? And I don't necessarily mean like a 386,
like that computer,
but on a laptop, right? We're talking about something much more complex,
right?
In
maybe even biologic.
Where was the matrix rendered? It was being rendered inside the brain-computer interface,
right?
But it could be more of a quantum computer, which is a whole different type of computer.
Yes. It's a whole nother episode.
So I think there's enough areas of overlap between simulation theory and UFOs. When you think of UFOs, not just in terms of are they extraterrestrial, but in terms of what does this reveal about the nature of reality?
Right. And so I'm like really curious about this all of a sudden. Not all of a sudden, but in this context. Why do you think that UFOs and nukes are connected? If we are in a simulation, what's the connection there?
That's an interesting.
Because what would the real implications of a nuke going off be if we're in a simulation?
Well, okay, think of it again. Let's think of the same phenomenon that we talked about in our lives.
Right.
Right. You might go in this direction, but we don't want you to go in that direction. We want you to go in this direction. So we're going to put something there to make you go in this direction. Similarly, in my life, now think of it as societal.
Okay.
If at a societal level, the projection has been done forward to say, if you use these nukes, this is what's going to happen. Therefore, we want to tell you there are beings here that can turn them off. So this is just a speculation.
Of course.
But I believe that the connection is they want to know how far along we've come, because this gets back to what is the purpose of the simulation overall. It gets back to, why do you play video games?
Right.
We play video games to have fun, to have experiences that we might not have individually.
Right.
But then why do we run large-scale computer simulations? That we do to see what will
predictive happen. Outcomes. Yes.
Yeah. We want to predict what will happen if we keep on this road, but then let's change some variables. Let's go down this other road and what would happen. And now let's change some variables and go down this other road. And so it's possible, Jacques mentioned this idea of a control mechanism.
Yes.
Are we being influenced at a societal level?
Right.
Now, it could be because they want to see if we're going to blow ourselves up. Part of the simulation could be to see if we learn to treat each other well.
Right. In spite of them.
In spite of them. Yeah.
Right. Having them right there, but choosing this other path. Like, we're not going to go there. We're going, and maybe that's the ultimate test, right? Annihilation versus like chaos and love, right?
Right. Yeah. Or we're at a filter.
That's a great way of saying it.
That's used, within science fiction.
Science fiction, yeah.
Especially like the Prime Directive in Star Trek.
Yes.
We're sort of pre-warp civilization, is what they would call it in Star Trek. And these other civilizations, whether it's physical civilizations or it's people watching us from the simulation on a screen saying, okay, we need to influence these guys, but not directly.
Right.
We're not allowed to directly interfere yet, but we want to nudge them along in a certain direction.
Right.
And so there may be something going on, at that societal level UFOs as well. I think I'm the only guy who'll say I don't know exactly what's going on with UFOs, because everybody has a theory.
Everybody thinks they know.
Everybody comes back and says they have a theory.
If someone is telling you they know what UFOs are, and because usually that, most of the time that's the case. If they have a PayPal link and they're telling you that they have the secrets of the universe, get the hell out of there. That's my. But okay, and funny enough,
but I will say I know what they're not, which is nothing, which is what the scientific community wants us to believe.
Right, consensus reality.
Yeah,
between us all in mainstream science. So okay, this leads into this question. And we'll wrap up soon, of course, and I'm so thankful for your time. But do you think that there are people, now I'm talking about in simulation characters, right?
Yeah.
characters like us,
Yeah.
who know the truth in government or the deep state, whoever it may be, who could be maybe talking to the simulator and setting up these conditions for the way that they need to be nudged.
Okay, well, I'm going to answer using science fiction.
Okay.
Because, again, I find...
Like the three-body problem.
The
kind of.
Three-body problem. Yeah, I was going to go back to the 13th floor.
Okay. Oh, good one. Yeah.
We had talked about
Yes.
Earlier. And so, for those that haven't seen it, it starts off in it was released in 1999, so it takes place in 1999, and they have built a simulation of 1930s or 40s Los Angeles, and they end up going back in, and they end up inhabiting the bodies of the NPCs. So they have characters that are basically NPCs living their lives. They look like the main characters, but then there's lots of other people there,
right?
And they take over that body, so they inhabit the avatar.
Right.
So now we're somewhere in between the RPG and the NPC version. Normally an NPC, like the Sims, where they're just doing their things. But then the player, in this case, inhabits...
possesses it.
Putting in, like in the Matrix, it's as if Neo was there doing his thing, and then he plugs into the Matrix, and now he takes over that body. And now he knows what's going on outside the simulation, as well as inside the simulation. Now, I think that's possible. One of the things they did in that film, actually, I don't remember if it was in the film, but it was in the book that the film is based on.
Which a lot of people don't know that it's based on a book.
In fact, one of the things that happens is there's a bartender there inside the 1930s version of LA.
Right.
Who, first of all, he reads this note that wasn't meant for him. It was meant for another player. And he figures out that he's in a simulation. His first reaction is, why would they do this to us? But then eventually he tries to get out of the simulation.
Yeah.
But there were characters that knew they were in the simulation, and they were reporting back to the simulators what was happening. Now, is that happening with UFOs? I think there are certainly people in government programs who know much more than the public. Like they know at least that, for example, I'm 95% sure there have been reverse engineering programs. Why? Because I've talked to enough people that have said, whether it's Lockheed, Aerospace Corp, one of these,
Northrop, EG&G, all of them,
the standard names, and at least one of those I have, some real confidence.
Me too.
Who work there.
Yes. Well, not that far, but
yeah. So, and I don't want to get too much into which one, but let's just say one of those definitely had a reverse engineering program. The question is, what was it that they were
reverse engineering?
That is something that I think. People have speculated on, and some people might think they know, but others don't know. That's the big mystery with the UFO phenomenon is
right.
What's going on exactly? What is this revealing to us about reality? The fact that we interpret these as spaceships, I think, is a key part of where we are technologically.
I was going to say it's a reflection of, if you go by what Jacques Vallée is saying, it's kind of a reflection of what's right on the edge of the prefaces of your capability societally. Right. So, fairies to God. Well, no, because that wouldn't really make sense.
No, but airships. So if you look at
I was going to say the airship sightings 18s.
Yeah, they were, slightly more advanced than where we had gotten to.
Right.
And then we started to see not just orbs, but we started to see these flying discs.
Yes.
Which is a different technology than we're using. And now we're seeing Tic Tacs and other types of things. So are they trying to nudge us along? But we're also interpreting it a certain way. It's kind of like in the 1950s.
Right.
If you look at both the science fiction and the UFO narratives, what do they say? Mars attacks, right? They're from Mars or they're from Venus. If you talk to like the contactees in the 50s, they were being told,
George Adamski.
Yeah, Adamski, all those guys, right? They were literally being told they're from Venus. Now we know they're probably not from Venus now. Right?
It just would make no sense. Yeah.
But imagine you're the not the contactee, but the contactor. You're the alien or the being that's trying to talk to somebody in the 50s. They're asking you where you're from. What are you going to tell them? Okay, you can't
say you're from an exoplanet that they don't know about them yet.
About exoplanets, right? You can't say you're from another dimension. They have no idea.
They don't understand it.
So they'll say,
"Holy shit,
Venus. We're from Mars." So now they'll say we're extraterrestrial because I call it the 10-year-old test. There's a certain amount of knowledge that passes the 10-year-old test. Now, if you go back to the 1800s, people didn't even know about other solar systems, right? Let alone other planets. So But by 1939, where was Superman from? Right, we have a Superman movie out now.
Krypton.
Where is Krypton? Oh, it's another planet in the galaxy. Even a 10-year-old would say, "Okay, I accept that."
Right.
Because there was enough knowledge. There's a relationship between science and science fiction, which is why it's called science fiction.
Yes.
Where it's trying to communicate these ideas, and when the ideas get out there enough, then you can have interesting fiction that is accepted. You couldn't say that you're from another planet in 1600s.
Right. Right.
You can say it today. You could say it in the 20th century.
Right.
And now the multiverse is a concept that enough people understand the idea
of the
multiverse. And so therefore the superheroes are all multiverse characters. What if the same thing is happening, that the writers' room is saying, okay, we have to give these people something that they will accept, and at least most scientists today don't accept the reality of UFOs, but the ones that do, they tend to go towards the extraterrestrial hypothesis.
Yeah.
Because that's at least still in our paradigm.
Right.
They don't
right.
They're here, but at least it's possible they accept there's life on other planets. Most scientists
statistically, I mean,
and even most scientists who are against UFOs say yes, it's probably life on other planets.
Right.
So therefore, it's okay to say we're from one of those other planets. Whether they are or not is another question. Is an open question.
Right, and then once you bring in like the dimensional aspects of it, where most people are right now in the UFO community, not on the mainstream.
So I'll tell you, I've written articles for NBC News on UFOs, and I've tried to write articles for CNN and other places, and there is very much a media filtering going on here, where they're like, well. Like I wrote an article for NBC News called "The Government Takes UFOs Seriously. Why Doesn't Silicon Valley or Academia?"
Right.
And my point was they should. And I said, well, there are other possible explanations beyond it's nothing or it's alien. And they were like, no, cut that. We don't have room for that. That's too complicated for people to understand. So they wanted you to say it's alien or it's just a government program and there's nothing behind it. There's no NHI. Like that is something the public understands, right? That if you look at the clips, right. The short clips on CNN or Fox News,
right.
Are they aliens or aren't they? That's as
right.
far as they're going to go.
Right.
Every now and then you get the time travel hypothesis, which again is something we can understand because of science fiction.
Right. So it's putting it in a framework.
Yeah.
Right.
And does the science fiction actually, the cultural elements, popular culture, restrict our thinking? So, for example, Close Encounters of the Third Kind was a huge success.
Right.
Communion was a huge success.
Huge.
But when Jacques said when he went and finally met Steven Spielberg, his one disagreement with him was that these were clearly aliens in the movie, and Spielberg says it's too late to change that. It's too complicated to consider these other possibilities.
Right.
But then, so I gave a speech on this at an academic screening of Close Encounters. It was interesting because not a lot of people had even realized all the UFO narratives that were brought into this film that were based on real.
Right. It wasn't art influencing, because most people think, oh, well, we get the archetypal alien from Close Encounters, but Close Encounters is referencing the actual Project Blue Book files, and he was consulting with Hynek himself.
Yeah.
So,
and the French scientist was based on
Vallée, right. And
you get that element where there are all these threads of real world narratives inside Close Encounters. But then
it's almost like the most expensive documentary. Right?
That's true. But then, because it was so successful, it's now restricted a lot of the mainstream thinking to, is it aliens or not aliens? And that's it.
Right.
The popular media, not just science fiction, but popular media in general, prepares people to think certain ways and it restricts their ability.
I think you're 100% onto something there. That, I mean, I think a lot of people would say that, pop culture it's programming.
Yeah.
Right.
So
it's conditioning,
but it's also trying to then turn around, and it could be unintentional. I'm not saying that Spielberg wanted us to think it's only aliens. It's almost an unintentional level. There may be an intentional level as well.
Right.
Which you get into the relationship between the CIA and Hollywood. That's a whole different topic.
Oh yeah. So I encourage people to not only see your lectures at places like Contact in the Desert, but also like just check you out and all your interviews, because I think, like I said, I think you're onto something. Everyone else, thank you. This has been Total Disclosure. Much more to come. Avi Loeb next week is going to be in the chair, so I'm looking forward to that. There's a new interstellar object that has entered our solar system. I wonder what that. So these little nudges, right? I think something to do there. But everyone, you know what it is. Leave a rating and a review if you're listening on one of the great podcast platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, like, share, subscribe, and if you want to join the membership, do that. We'll see you next time.